Oh. So when we get started here, so it's Tuesday, week 8. Um, got a couple people online, which is good to see. I know we've got a couple people. We've got 7 students down in Houston at the Afrotech conference this week, so they'll be gone. Um, so make sure I'll post this here also. So we're going to continue doing Flutter this week. We're going to look at getting data from a web API and reading that in, getting JSON data over the internet. It'll bring us into using asynchronous calls and something called futures here. Dart has what I think is a nice interface or a way of working with asynchronous data with futures. And we're seeing this sort of idea in a number of different programming languages. So although we're doing it in Dart, I think it's a really good concept to learn and see for managing data. Just knowing what a future is and how we can kind of work with the future here with this. I'm trying to, and I think we're just going to do it this way. In the past, I've done database storage here, but I think we're going to kind of skip over that. We'll see next week. We're going to do Firebase next week and talk about that here. So it also gets us into more advanced Dart programming or Flutter programming and start working with some more concepts like that. So let's go into, I'm going to click, I'm in Unit 8. I'm just going to go to this processing JSON data link here. So again, usually there are going to be times where things are going to be slow. We're working with a web API. We're getting data from a database. We're getting data maybe from Firebase. We're even just reading a file from a device. All those things can be slow. And we generally don't want to block the main UI thread. Flutter is really interesting. It just kind of has a single thread. So we do have to be a little more careful than in some place about not blocking that main thread. So there are two, well, the common ways, if something's going to block or we use the await keyword, which will basically say, watch this, and this is going to take a while, but don't block the rest of the interface, everything else from going on here. When we use an await keyword in a method or a function, we then have to mark it as asynchronous, saying that this is going to be run asynchronously. So this await and asynchronous go together. If you use await anywhere in your in a method, that makes your function have to be asynchronous. And a lot of APIs will use these kind of behind the scenes. So you may not necessarily have to use these, but that's what's running there. What you get is a future object, which kind of represents like a future integer is not an integer, but at some point it's going to be an integer there, or a future string. It's not a string yet, but it's going to be a string. Well, it's going to be one of two things. Either it will be a string, a value, if everything succeeds, or it might be an error. So we look at those three things. So with futures, we see three kind of, a variable can mean three states. There can be a future, basically a box around saying this is going to be, it's kind of like a present we haven't unwrapped yet there. And we're going to watch this YouTube video. I'm going to open up this. Does a pretty good job of explaining the start futures here. My volume.
focus here on asynchronous coding patterns in Node. Today, we're going to cover one of the most basic APIs that has tracing, futures. Most modern languages have some kind of support for asynchronous querying. Many offer a futures API, some call it promises, and for the most part, most futures are very similar to those found in other languages. One thing of this little view boxes for data. So we can view one, and it starts off closed. Then a little while later, it pops open, and inside there's either a value or an error. So those are the three states a future could be in. First, the box is closed. We call that uncompleted. Then the box opens, and it's completed with a value or completed with an error.
So again, this kind of goes over the three states a future can be. It can be uncompleted, and then later on, like he said, it'll pop open, and it'll be either completed with data or completed with error. And what we'll see often is that in our code here, let's see if I'm good. We'll see code that'll say like, here he's just delaying stuff, and then so our future, and you can say then, and then you can get the value, and then you can work with that value. So initially this will be when it's delayed, but then it'll be some value, and then otherwise it'll be some error. So often when we look at our code, we see these sorts of things. Now we're going to use something called a future builder, so the structure of our code will be different than this. But again, even in the future builder, we'll be watching for these cases of uncompleted and then completed with data or completed with error. So that's not a bad video. Just it's only a couple minutes, 5 minutes. I think it's a good introduction to this sort of stuff here. Well, let's look a little bit more at this Start Collab, which introduces some of these things. Talks about async and await, like I say. So again, async is a keyword we put at when we're defining a method. So we would say like void main async added there, meaning that. And anytime we have an await in a method there, we would have to have an async for that stuff. So so like here, rather than saying like just create order, this is we're going to want to wait. This is going to take a while. We don't want to hang everything on this call, so we put an await here so that the computer will wait that, put it kind of in the background, and come back to it. And then this will generate a future here, and we have to manage that future a little bit for this. So like here's an example of a future create message here is returning a future string there. We're awaiting some call to some method that's going to return a string here. And so this method is marked as async. So we often look at async and await working together here, and then they're generally returning a future for this here. Now, and again, this is actually what they're doing. This is what's doing the future. They're actually delaying, putting in a purposeful delay here so that it doesn't complete right away with this delayed method here. But this is just a placeholder for some, like when we were calling an API or something like that, that's going to be slow here. And then again, here we'll await this, and it'll happen. What happens then is that this will run, and again, if we have a print after that, that will run, and then eventually this print that is a future will run eventually, and it'll show our order. So it will print this, but it will not. It will wait a while and it'll print it. So it will do this kind of out of order, out of sync for this code. So. So we'll use something called a future builder in Flutter, and we'll get to that in a second. And so and it's a nice way of managing these sorts of futures. Before we get there, let's talk about fetching data from the internet here. We're going to use HTTP request here for this. So I'm going to open up this little walkthrough of how to fetch data from the internet here. And again, it's telling you to make sure you don't use these low-level packages here. They're often specific to certain platforms. So HTTP package will work on any of the platforms because again, it'll work on iOS, it'll work on Android, it'll work on web, so that sort of stuff. Now, what we'll see is we do have to add HTTP to our libraries. And we'll look at some different ways of doing that here. Then we import the package here. Now, you may, if you're doing Android and iOS stuff, have to go and actually modify some of the like the Android manifest to add these permissions in here for this. But here's how we actually do a network request. Once we have our HTTP library, we just say http.get here. So I'll go out and get like a web page or whatever. And we specify a web page here. So I can actually grab this. This is going to return a JSON file. It returns this JSON file here. Now, this is a string. So we need to convert this into an actual URL or actually URI here. So we're saying URI parse, and that'll convert this string into a URI. So I think we've talked about URIs before. You've heard about URIs and URLs right before. URLs are are specific to web things or internet things, and URIs are more generic and can kind of include a wider range of descriptors than just what a URL has there. But again, the format is what you're used to. That, you know, like when you see https:// something like that, that's a URL, and it's also a URI. And then you might see ones like file : / or email, you know, there'll be different. You can, you can do your phone and all that sort of stuff with those URIs. Okay, so yeah, we just say HTTP GET, and then we parse a string with the code here. We'll look if we need, sometimes with HTTP, you need to put a header in with it that's not the default header. Sometimes when you're specifying an API key or something like that, you have to modify the header as part of this request for that, but we'll see that later. So we get like this generates this this JSON file is returned back, and we want to map this to an actual Dart object. So I want to do a JSON to a class, a Dart class, and we did this with Java, if you remember, there. So again, we're going to define an object of that type. So what do we have? We've got this looks like an integer user ID, an ID is an integer, and then a string that's called title. So again, integer user ID, int ID, string title for this. And then we're just going to define this from JSON, album from JSON, and we're just going to create a map here that is going to map user ID to user ID, ID to ID. So basically mapping these, because sometimes the tags here might not exactly match your method, your local variables, your class variables here. Generally, we like them to do that, but they don't always. Now, you can generate this by hand. It tends to be kind of error prone. Sometimes I like to use this QuickType IO website. I can parse, place JSON in here. So I can take like this JSON, put it in there. And then I can have it generate things like Java for this, or in this case, Dart here. It'll generate this Dart for us. Now, by default, its title is called Welcome. And so we're going to change that. Let's say we're going to call it Album. So this will generate this class for us here. It looks very similar to this example class. Here's our 3 variables. Here's our constructor. Here's our constructor. And here's our factory. Here's our factory. They're actually combining the factory with the map here. So here's our map for this. So again, I find this QuickType IO page really helpful when to automatically generate this Dart file from a JSON file that I want to parse for this. Okay. Somehow or another, you have to create this, and you need to get this method to convert a JSON string into an album object here. And then here's where we're actually going to do this. This is our service. We're going fetch album. We're saying HTTP get, and we're specifying the URL. That's here we get some response, which is a string here. Well, it's not a string. It's a response from an HTTP, and it has a response code. So we've all seen the 404 errors where something goes wrong here, right? So we're going to watch that. The correct code we want is a 200 here. So if the response status code that gets back from us is a 200, everything's okay. So now then we can use our album and convert the JSON to an album here for this. And we can specify the response body here. So the response, we have 2 things. We have the response status code, and then the response body is the actual string. So here we're calling it this way here. Now this call here is a little more complicated as far as map goes. One thing I like about this is that generally they have a little method up here, album album from JSON. We can just pass in a string and it will return an album method for us, and it will do this JSON decode of the string for us. So this actually has some of this code built in to it. That's another reason why I like this QuickType response there. And again, if we didn't get the 200, the all okay from the website, then we're going to throw some exception there. The last thing is, how do we display this data for this? And we're going to use a future builder for this. So within our builder, we're going to add a future builder. So we're going to say future builder, and then the type. We're going to build it. This is going to be an album eventually there. So the future, this is the name of the variable that we're going to have in the future here. And here's our builder. And one thing we specify in our builder is a snapshot, the data we're getting back here. And then based on that data, we'll do different things. So if the snapshot has data, it means the future has already happened. Future's already here. We've unboxed it. We have the data now. We've been waiting, and it's here. So eventually, the future will have data, and then we'll just display that data. So like here, they're just showing the data in a text widget. If it doesn't have data, that means we're still waiting on it there. Well, actually, we're going to check if it has an error. So if you remember from that website, it either has data or has error. Where was that? Let me bring that video up again. Should have kept it there. So again, it's either incomplete or we're looking at the two things. It either completes with data or completes with error. So that's what we look at here. This is the complete with data. This is the complete with error. Snapshot has data. We'll display it. If snapshot has error, it's that. Now, if neither of these is true, we're still waiting. Then it's still uncompleted. So if neither of these are weighted, by default, we just load a spinner saying we're waiting on this. So if it's not this or this, then we're just waiting on it, and we can just say, waiting, or display some sort of indicator that we're waiting for this to happen. Now, in order for this to work, we've got to actually fetch things. So when do we fetch things? We are actually going to fetch the album earlier on here in our init state stuff. So if you remember last week, we talked a little bit about init state. In our app, we're in a state here, and this is like the constructor. Init state, you can add it as an override here, and then you just have to make sure you call the parent init state there. But then you can call and this is only going to happen once when your thing loads here. So often when you're going to display a page, you're going to say, oh, right away, we're going to go out and try to fetch this data. And then we're going to have a future builder, and we're going to show a progress bar. When the data gets back, then we're going to display this data here. So we're going to fetch the data right away. Now, there are times when you might have a button. Maybe you'll have the user, like we'll be doing a weather app later on Thursday, where you'll enter a city maybe and hit get data. So then you won't call this fetch weather or whatever you want until they enter a city and then hit load data. But here we're just going to call it in basically the constructor in the init state of our widget. So we're going to fetch that data there. And again, that's what does our future builder here. Now, this is all in one class here, and we'll look at a similar one that's all in one class today. And then we'll start breaking it up into sub files today. So, okay. So that's fetching data from the internet. Oh, I'll just also note, again, we'll have to add our file either to our YAML here or somewhere else, or use a command to do that. Okay, we parse the data. Right. So this walks through a little bit more information about how to use this QuickType IO for this stuff. When you're testing out JSON style stuff, this JSON placeholder file is really helpful here. You can fetch a couple different types of things. There are posts, comments, albums, photos, to-dos, and users. So if you go to users, there'll be 10 users listed here with sample data. With albums, there'll be 10 albums here. You can fetch that, or here we fetched an actual one particular album. So again, you can get the whole list of 10 albums, or you can get one particular album. So when you are trying to test out a web API or learning something, this JSON placeholder .typeio.com website's really kind of helpful for that. And so far, it's been very consistent. We've had these before, and then after a year or so, they've disappeared. This one has probably been up for 5 years, I think, or more. So it's been very consistent, which I like as a teacher. So, okay, so let's have you try out this code and play with this code a little bit today. This was not your learning activity. We'll do a fuller one, but here I thought it might be good just to see this code a little bit in a very simple example. So we're going to look at this Flutter currency example So I'm going to go over to Android Studio. I'm going to do a new Flutter project. Give it some name. Remember, it has to be all lowercase. I like to change the org. And then I'm just going to do it web and Android here. Oh, it's still private. I swear I made it public. Okay. Okay. It should be public now. Okay. So I created this new project. I'm just going to go in here, go to the lib. So again, you can actually, I should have just maybe cloned this. I could have just cloned this. I just need a new project. I forget. That would have worked also. But I'm just going to go to main.dart. Everything's in one file here to start with. So I'm just going to take the code in main.dart and paste it over to this new project here. I'm gonna run this on a web browser here and just run this and see. So now initially this isn't going to work. I guess if I would have cloned it, it would have worked, but it's going to, I'm failing on this HTTP Dart command here. It's not finding that package for this. And so I can do a couple commands. There's a command line here where you can add it in. I tend to just put it in my PubSpec YAML file, this command. I'll add this library as a dependency there. So I'm just going to go to my pubspec.yaml file, slowly go down environment dependencies here. Now I've got to get the level of indent. It's kind of like YAML files are kind of like Python files in that the level of indent matters. So I'm going to go back and have it at the same level as Flutter. So it's got to be a dependency. It's not at the same level as SDK, but it's the same level as Flutter is one of my dependencies, and HTTP. Well, and I'm just saying I need anything larger than 1.1 here. I like to put in a comment here so I can remember. And in YAML files, comments are pound signs again, kind of like Python here. So this for. Okay, and then I want to do my pub get. Click on that, and it'll download this library, and hopefully works. And again, there's another way of doing it. In the command line, I think you can add this flutter pub add HTTP. So again, I think if you go to the terminal here and type in that, I think that does the same thing. Okay. So now I've done my pub get here. I can run this. And again, now this isn't red anymore. My import seems to be working. And so I can run this and hopefully it'll run okay. So with Flutter, there are widgets and there are packages. So you, in general, if you're just using different widgets, you don't have to do anything to the pub get because it have access to all the standard widgets. But again, we do it sometimes want to add a package. And so that'll be like adding new functionality for like here, it's HTTP, or like when we do Firebase, we'll add a package for that. And there are a lot of packages. In fact, there's a whole web series, Package of the Week, I think it's Package of the Week, that Flutter has. And a lot of these are open source or publicly generated. There's a lot of private packages out there either also. So, and here's my website. Let me make this a little smaller, stick it over here. So, again, it's just running, it's just showing the URL rate and the amount that I was talking too much, but at first it should have loaded with, here, let's see if I hit a hot refresh, if that'll update it. No, run it again. It should, I think I'm trying to see what it's showing, the future builder here, if it's waiting, we should display circular progress bar for that. So I don't know why it's let's see, I want to show the circular progress bar but oh, it's still waiting for Chrome to get connected. Well, we'll see. So it should. So let's look at this a little bit. I'm in the main build function. There's a scaffold, that sounds real app bar. The body is a center. Okay, so here let's watch and see if it displays so this is just loading the whole widget stuff. So this is not the circular progress bar, but now it's not, it should be showing a circular progress bar here. No, interesting. Okay, so again, in my body, I have a center widget, and then the child of that is a future builder, and we're returning a rate result for this. Our future is called future rate here, and so up above here, we are declaring a variable, a future rate result, and we're calling it future what? So this is our variable up here that we're declaring, and we're using it down in our future builder here. Our builder has our snapshot. Here we're just calling it snap because it's so much shorter than saying snapshot, apparently. And then we're just checking the connection state. If it's waiting, we're showing a circular progress indicator, which doesn't seem to be working right now. If it doesn't have data, we're saying there's an error. Otherwise, if it has data, we're displaying that data here with some widgets for this. Okay. And then here's our rate return that we have. That's our data model for this. And we also have a method up here to fetch the currency stuff. Now, right now, this is all in one file in main.dart. Let's just talk about how we generally structure this stuff. So generally, the data models, like this rate stuff, would be its own class. And again, let's look at where that's coming from. I'm going to go up here and grab this the URL here from this web service and just paste it into my browser here. So here's what the JSON is I'm getting from this web service. I'm getting this JSON back. And I'm going to store that in in a rate, a conversion rate. So I'm going to make an object, and that's what this little class here at the bottom is. So I'm going to put that in its own file here. And generally we stick the data models in their own folder, often called models or data models or something like that. So I'm going to make my own. Well, first I'm just going to put it in a file here just to do that. So I'm just going to do a new file here. And I'm going to call it the rate model .dart. So again, I've got to watch. I think everything has to be all lowercase without spaces in it, stuff like that. So I'm calling it rate underscore model .dart. I'm putting it here. And then from the main thing, I'm going to do, oh, I wonder if I could have just had that pull this out. If I would have looked at refactor, I could have extracted this. Yeah, as a, well, I don't even as a method, maybe. I don't know. I'm going to move this then out here and into this one. So I have this rate model out there. Now, in my code here, I can't find this, so I have to import it for this. Let's see if it will be import. Yeah. So it put the right import. Well, I put an import in here. Here. Now, with my local files, I prefer not to do this package stuff. I often just say import rate model .dart. And I like to have all my global ones first and then my local ones second. There. So again, I could have just put that import rate model .dart here. But then you're saying, Tom, I thought you said you want to put this in a folder. So I actually often do that second. I mean, you can do it at the same time. So let's do a folder. So I'm just going to do under lib, I'm going to say new directory. And again, models, I'm going to call it data models. And then I'm going to copy this into that data model, the rate model stuff. It will say, do you want to refactor it? And what it'll do is whenever we do our imports, it'll update all of our imports and stuff like that. I want to say, yes, refactor that. So now in my main .dart, it'll add data models .rate model .dart. So again, it put it in a nice folder for this stuff. So I have a folder for each of my data models here. I want to do the same thing for this fetch user stuff, this method here, and try to set that up in its own folder. What would you call this stuff that goes out, does something for you? It's not a UI element. What would you call it here? And again, different developers, different areas call it different things. I'm going to call it a service, I guess, there. So I'm going to make a service for this. Well, I'm going to make a service folder. So this time I'm just going to make a new folder called services. And then inside services, I'm going to make a new class or new file for fetching API calls or stuff. This is actually going to currency converter stuff. Might do different ones, so maybe I'll just call this fetch. Let's see, rates. .dart. And let's see if we can, from the main, if we can just take this out of here and put it in there. Oops, I put it in there. Now here we're going to need our HTTP stuff. So in main.dart, where I have my import here, I'm going to take that out. And I don't actually need that in my main anything, which is one of the nice things. I can just have that import here. I need my rate result. So just like here, where I'm importing this rate result, I'll need that import also here. I have to watch. Now it's not just data model, it'll be previous folder dot data model here like that. So dot dot slash, because dot dot of course means go up folder, because again, I'll be in services, I've got to go up to lib and then down to data models for that. And then this JSON decode, where's that at? So that'll import this dart.convert. In fact, if I go back to main, I don't need it there. It was actually there also. So I've moved all my HTTP stuff into some of my libraries into this separate little method, which is nice. Now here, back here, now when I call fetch user USD to euros, it's not finding that. So I got to make sure I import that. Again, when it imports it, it does this big long import. I prefer just to say this. Again, if you're in a big project where you have multiple packages, you should keep the package thing here. But again, we're often working with relatively small things that just have one package in our code. So I like to do this. Just say import services dot fetch currency rates dot dart and import that. So now I should be able to run this again. And I've just moved things to the different locations a little bit. And I think it's smaller now so I can see better what's going on for this. So see if you can set yours up. And again, just you can name it whatever you want, but see if you can move the data model into a file here. Move the that fetch stuff into its own file here and set that up. One thing I like about Dart and stuff is that in Java, you always have to watch because the file name has to match the class name here. And you can only have one class per file and stuff like that. That's not true for Dart. So I can create a file name, whatever I want, and then I can have different classes or different methods in there. In fact, here, yeah, if I look at fetch currency, I don't even have a class there. I can have root level methods. It's kind of like Python in that way, where I don't have to have a class, instantiate a class and put things and then call things from that. Here, I can just declare a method and call that method directly here for this. Okay, and I shouldn't have changed the functionality at all. It should still work fine. So it still displays the current rate for this. It's making sense? We'll just stop a little bit, pause, let you catch up, and then we're going to look again at the next thing I want to look at is this rate thing, and maybe using how would we generate this? This was generated for us. If we didn't, how would we generate this and kind of recreate some of these files for this? But I'm just going to pause and see how we're doing. So let's look a little bit about how do we generate this rate stuff. So again, let's say we have an API here, and it returns a rate, a JSON file. How do I convert that to this? So again, one way is I could just look at it and see the different things. And so it has an amount, and it has that amount in here. It has a base, and it has a date, and it has a rate. Inside rate is a list of different values, euros, and then the euro amount. So basically it's saying from the base USD, we're converting to euros and looking at this. So most of these are just simple ones, a tag and a value here. This, the rates is actually a list of rates. We're just saying we just want 1 euros here. So it's a little different how that is set up. So again, I can look at this rate, and I can just say I'm a string is the date, and a double is the rate for this. I'm not actually parsing any of the other stuff because I'm assuming that that works here. And then yeah. So let's look at how we might generate some of this code for this. So I'm going to take this code and I'm going to go into this QuickType.io stuff, and I'm going to paste it in here. I'm going to go QuickType.io, say I have a JSON file, and I'm going to generate it to Dart. I always want to have null safety turned on because Flutter requires this. And I'm going to call this my rate. And it'll generate a sample rate for us. Now, this is more complicated than this rate here for this. So let's look at what they're doing here. This is actually mapping all the things, the amount, the base, the date, and the rate for this stuff. And it is going inside the rate and pulling out the euro for this rate here for this. So it is actually making a rates class here for this, the rates class. So it has the rate and rates. I should maybe call this base rate, or something different, so that because it creates something called rates. Because again, in here it's looking at this rates and doing that. So I'm going to call my main thing the base rate, and then inside that'll be something called rates that'll find this euro stuff for that and parse this in here. So again, you can do this, and we could use this. I'm going to maybe just make another Dart class here just to show. So here's a new file. Just going to call this rate 2. And I'm going to paste this file in here. Okay, then, so again, that's, you can generate this from scratch here. Or you can use one of these services like QuickType to do it. I would guess AI could do this okay also for you, would be able to generate this again for this. Now let's look at how we're going to process this. So when we fetch our currency here, we're doing this. So this is our fetch currency rates method where we create our URI here, we say HTTP GET and provide that URI here, and then we're going to decode this response for this stuff. Yeah, so it is actually doing this JSON decode stuff here. So it is doing the date and the rate, and then the rate result, this is what it's using because of this is inside this rates thing. So their rate model, this stuff is really just basically tied to this because it's inside here for this. So we are creating a rate result. We're passing the date, which we got from the rest of it, and other thing here. So the rate result here is nice and simple here, but it doesn't have all the data in it for this, doesn't have the amount in the USDA. So you could change this so that you maybe were passing in this base rate and getting all this information from it. So if you were doing that, you would, I'm going to try to change this. So here I'm getting my response back, and now I'm going to declare a base rate. What did I call this? Yeah, base rate. I'm going to have a base rate variable, and I'm going to use this, base rate from JSON and specify a string for this and get that. Now this, why this isn't working here. Providing it a string. Oh, I think I'm not importing it, right? Yes. Okay. Yeah, now I'm importing it correctly. So again, now I'm getting my response back from my response. And then once I have that response back, I'm taking the body and converting it into a base rate. And then I can just return that base rate here. So let me just comment all this stuff out and just do a return the base rate. Not type today. Now, here, then my method shouldn't be returning this. It should be returning a base rate. Now, because I have an await in here and I'm doing this, I can't return an actual base rate. So I'm returning a future base rate for this stuff. So all I've done is converted from this rate result version here. And again, we had a bunch of the JSON parsing stuff in this service. I moved that all now into this method that I had generated that does all the JSON parsing for me here. And so I'm just returning a future base rate. Now in main, I should be expecting that as coming back. So my future rate here this future is going to be a base rate. I got to make sure I import that. I'm now calling my method again, not future rate. Here's my future rate. Again, it has to be a, make sure I have the right type here, base rate. And then my data here, how do I get that? Now, assuming that I'm getting my data here, here's my snapshot. It has data here. I want to display that euro rate for that. So my data is called R. How do I handle that? So I'd say R dot rates. And then inside rates, I'd want to say euros to get that, I think. So I want to say R dot rates. Oh, it's this euro. R dot euro dot. I think this should do it. Okay, let's see if I can do this right. So again, inside my rates, my base rate is a another attribute called rates, which is this rate stuff, and inside that is euro. So again, I want to say r dot rates dot euro, and then convert that to a string to a display. So all I've done was replace this, what is actually was a simpler version of this rate stuff with this more functional, more complex version with this base rate, with this automated, with this automated generated one for this. I've had to update the fetch rate to use that, and then I've had to update my main.dart to use that also. So one thing I wanted trying to do is show you this, because starting on Thursday for the learning activity, we'll have you go out there, find an API, it'll generate JSON. You want to then display some of that JSON in here in a Flutter program. How do you want to do that? So you'll see the JSON that's generated from that. You want to create a Dart class to hold that sort of stuff. And with that, you'll need to create some methods to go from that JSON into this, whatever your base, your class is, and then be able to call that and work with that inside your method here. Okay, so let's see how we're doing. I'm going to close out some of these things. I think I'm going to do one more example here. I'm going to go, so back here, our main file here. Under fetching data from the internet. Let's look at this cookbook tutorial. I like to have some of these on as an actual Flutter file too. So if I click on that, fetch data from the internet, it opens up this document walkthrough with these stuff. I'm just going to go down to the bottom where it says this is the completed result here. I'm going to move that completed result into its own file. So I'm going to try to do this again. I'm going to stop. I'm going to make a new project, a new Flutter project. Flutter Web API sample. It's going to create that. And I'm going to take this whole example that they have, copy it, and overwrite my main.dart with it. And we're going to see what that does. Now, right away, there's an error, which is HTTP Dart package for this. So again, remember, we want to add that. Let's try what they suggest is with the command line, adding it this way. I'm thinking that might not work. So I'm going to try it out here. Go to here. I'm going to type in that into my terminal window. Yeah, so one thing, the way we have Flutter set up is that our command line is not working with Flutter right now because Flutter is not in our path here. We're going to fix that next week when we get into Firestore and add Fire this. I've already worked with one student on this issue and getting this into the path, but we're going to do that. So it's not going to work right now. So rather than doing it that way, I'm just going to go into PubSpec YAML and scroll down to dependencies. I want to be at the same level as, Flutter, and I'm going to add the dependencies for the HTTP. I want to make sure it's 1.1 or higher there. I think that's what let me look at, yeah. HTTP colon above 1.1. I'm going to put that in there. Do my pub get. And then now this example should work fine. I'm going to then run this. Oops, I'm going to switch this to Chrome and run this. And again, remember, this is grabbing these album information, these fake albums from this temporary website. So here, this is just one of the fake album names that is displaying. So it just should do that. So that's working. Let's try to decipher this code. And I think, again, I think the best way to decide to kind of break down this code is to break it into some separate files. So again, we just did this from here, fetching data on the internet. I went to fetch data from the internet, that one. I scrolled down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then here's the complete example. I just grabbed that and pasted it in here. Let's look at this. So at my imports, I have right away, I have this service to fetch an album, this asynchronous service. So that runs right away. And then here's my album class. Second is my album class. So I want to actually, I think I want to put those in separate files here. And then here's my main app. And then I have to go down and get to my future state. I mean, my state. Here's my variable. It's my future. Here in an if state, I fetch that. And then I have a future builder here, which checks if I have data or if I have an error. Otherwise, shows a circular progress bar for this. So that's the general layout of it. It's all in one file, which is okay to start. But again, I want to move this into separate files, I think. So let's do that. Let's do a service. I'm just gonna make, I like to do folders right away, a services folder and a models folder. Inside services, I'm just going to do a new file and do my fetch albums start file, and I'm just going to move this into that. And similarly, I'm going to want to create an albums under my data one. I'm going to do a new file and do albums or album there and move this album class into there. Now for the album class, I shouldn't need any imports, I don't think, but for fetch album, I obviously need my HTTP stuff. So I'm going to grab that from here, and I need my convert. So those both have to be over here. I also need my album class that I just done. So let's see. I'm just going to say import and I'm just going to import slash models, yeah, album.dart. I forgot to name my album. I just called it album, not album.dart. So I want to rename that and make sure I add the .dart onto that. And it's going to want to refactor things. So down here it's saying that, and it should be somewhere where I say do that. Oh, it's citing. Refactor. Okay. Oops. It just called it .dart. So let's try that again. album. Okay, effect. There, that's better. Clear that up. All right. So now my album's working well. My fetch album is there, and my main.dart. Let's see what I'm missing there. I need to import my albums in here. Yeah. So hopefully now what we're seeing this a couple times. So I've got my data here. I'm declaring my album. There's some from JSON method here, which I can convert a string here and get an album back for this, hopefully. And then I have my fetch album service. It's asynchronous. It's an asynchronous. I'm doing an await on my get here. I'm passing in my URI here. I'm actually remembering last time I forgot to check the status code to make sure I'm at 200. And if so, I'm parsing that stuff here, and I'm doing this call here. Now, because my album doesn't have a full method here to convert the return an album, it's returning a factory here. So it's not returning the whole album from a string. And that's one thing that if you use the pre-made ones, it'll provide this basic functionality for you a little better. But I have to call this album from JSON, and then I specify my JSON decode with the body, and then I have to provide this map for this. And then if there's an error, and then in main.dart, I have a future builder. I need a future variable, so I have that declared, and I initialize that future variable. Right now, I'm doing it in init state for that. And when I'm waiting, if the data snapshot has data, I'm displaying it. Otherwise, if it has an error, I'm displaying the error. Otherwise, I'm showing a circular progress bar for this. It should be running here. I remember correctly from last time, some of the caching issue with the websites kind of prevent the circular progress bar from showing up. And if I'm running this on an Android or a phone, then I don't have this caching issue as much for this. I'd actually see the circular progress bar. It seemed very familiar to me. I'll have to try that out.
Yeah, I'm seeing it on Windows.
Are you seeing it on Windows? Yeah, okay. The circular progress bar. Yeah. I think there's just some limitations sometimes when we run these in a website as far as how quickly it gets updated, especially when we're grabbing things from an API. So. Why don't we have you try something else? Take one of the examples we've looked at so far and change it so that rather than fetching it right away here at init state, add a button that will fetch the data, a load or reload button. So see if you can work on that a little bit here. So we don't want to call it here. We want to call like fetch output. And again, you can do any of the ones we've done, either this one or the currency converter. They both are running it here. Add a button here to this. So feel free to use AI if you want to try to remember how to add a button and where to do this. Now, right now, we have a center and we have a future builder as the child. Center only has one child here. So you have to decide where you want to put that button here. And you want somewhere where you can list out some things. So here's our builder for this. So I'd probably recommend at some point adding a column in here. Then you can have children and you can have a couple different options here. What? Yeah, that's what I was asking AI because when I look at this, I want to add a button here, and I think I'm going to need a column for that and stuff, and have children, and I have the future builder. Do I put my button outside the future builder or inside the future builder? I remember there was a rule for that. I can't remember what it was exactly. So I asked AI. AI said, the button sits outside the future builder. It's important because you want to control when the future starts. So we can't do that if the button is inside the future builder. A future builder will only appear after the button is pressed for this. So that's what we want to do, is do that. So I'm going to add a column. So I'm going to click on my future builder. I'm going to surround it with a column. And then that gives me my children. And then I can add a button, an elevated button outside of that. So one of these things can be this elevated button. This has a nice little size box. We'll put that in there too. Size box. So now I have an elevated button and then a little box for buffering, and then I have my future builder after that. So now it sets this up so that it only displays the future builder if it's been run yet. I'm not going to do that yet because I think my future builder is smart enough to handle that. So we'll see. So again, here I'm just calling on my elevate button. I just have an on press method here, and I'm calling fetch album. I have to do it within a set state because it's updating my stuff. And then my button, what's displayed is load data for this stuff. So now I'm going to change this so that I do not call this in my init state. Now let's try that. And this is how I use AI a lot. There's often things like this where I just don't know exactly, I can't remember. And, you know, when I'm doing like a button and want to add this, where I should put it. So I like to ask AI to remind me, you know, what is the should the button be inside the future builder or not for this? So should then load up my site here. Runs my local web server. Okay, yeah, it says future builder has not been initialized yet. So that is a problem. So where future album? Okay, yeah, so it can't display my future here for this. So I have my future builder here, but it can't do it. So I'm going to stick in this if this future album is not null, then I'm going to display my future builder for this. So otherwise I get this error that's not initialized. So I'm going to say if future album, yes, that looks good. And then I'm going to pass my future builder inside that. Um, okay. So while I'm waiting for this to go, as far as work this week, we're going to do two things. Thursday, we'll go through this learning activity with the sample APIs, similar to what we did with when we did it in Android. I'll provide you an example here in Flutter that gets some APIs in, and you're going to have to go out and find your own API and add that to this list for this stuff. So again, this is still from the Java stuff. I have to update this with some of the Flutter stuff, so it's not ready, but should hopefully tomorrow I'll get this all ready to go so that by Thursday we can do this in class. And then the weather API will be the assignment here. We're going to have you go through this Flutter project. We're going to use the open weather API call here to get the weather and parse that data here. We'll use the same code as we used before. I just haven't updated it with the newest library versions here. So I'll try to, again, do that before class on Thursday. I should have time tomorrow to get that done. So those are the two assignments for this week. All right, did this ever run? I'm running in an issue with null safety here. So again, it's saying you're testing if future album is null, but the way with null safety is set up, future album can't be null up here for this. It can be late here. So I have to change this the way I declare a future album and not make late means I'm going to initialize it later on here. I'm going to make it a future album, but I'm going to allow it to be nullable. So I'm going to say, I think it's a future album. I put in this question mark here. It may be null there. And then here, I can actually check if it is null, and I can initialize it here. There's probably a better way to get around this as far as null safety goes, but I think this will solve our problem. I don't work with null safety very much, and so Dart, when I get into something like Dart and null safety, it takes me a while to kind of get used to it. And to tell you the truth, I'm not the best at managing null safety, so sometimes I take shortcuts that probably shouldn't as far as null safety goes. So. Send out an email. There's 2 Minnesota Power internships that are been just advertised. And know students are often looking for those. So if you're looking for a Duluth internship, there's 2. There was one. I think the deadline is actually today for the business intelligence one, something like that. And then now there's 2 new. Both of them are more. All 3 of them are more like business analyst, not coding kind of internships. Okay, so here's my thing. I can hit load data. Yep, and then I got to see my little spinning thing a little bit for that. So, and it loaded the data in. Like I say, I'm gonna wrap up. I suggest you go through some of this stuff. Watch. I like the video; it's pretty good here. This Dart collab working with filters and async. Work through that, and again, you might want to read through this fetching data from the internet sort of stuff there. And we'll go through these examples we'll do the learning activity on Thursday. Sound good? All right.